Hey guys, this is Tom Box, and in the next event that you go to, sorry to say, you have an 80% increased chance of receiving a slow play warning, or perhaps even receiving a slow play upgrade to a game loss. Why is that? Is that a number I pulled out of my ass? Probably, but you probably still want to know why. So today's ruling video is going to be a little bit different because I'm not really going to quiz you guys on anything. It's hard to kind of quiz you on like, oh, how to stop someone from slow playing or just maintaining an overall game state changing card. And that's right, I'm talking about Mulcharmy, Fuwalos, and the Dominus Impulse. Those two cards are meta-defining, and the changes are going to ripple through the entire game. Mulcharmy Fuwalos is likely going to be the culprit why you or your opponent is going to be receiving that slow play, warning, and likely going to be upgraded into game loss because you're just super unprepared for that card. And Dominus Impulse, on the other hand, is likely going to be the reason why most people are going to receive procedure error minors, upgraded to warnings, to game losses. And that's what I want to break down. I don't want you guys to receive these kinds of warnings, so let's dive into the logic of why it is even happening and how do we prevent that. And if you guys can help me do a quick favor, just hit that like button, hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and let's talk about the reasonings and how to prevent yourself from getting screwed over by that Mulcharmy. In terms of Mulcharmy Fuwalos, the card itself isn't even really the biggest threat. Well, actually, let me take that back. It probably is, but the second biggest threat is yourself. And you can say one thing that's going to lead to you getting that particular problem. Thinking. And what's it going to lead into? Slow play minor infraction into a penalty of a warning. I'm saying it pretty properly because, judging terms, you got to say it right. The penalty is a warning. The infraction is a slow play. Why does the word thinking matter here? Because when you're getting hit by a Mulcharmy Fuwalos, the first thing you do is you have to go through several steps in your brain to really comprehend the situation that you're in. If you had a call by the grave, then you wouldn't be saying thinking. You'd be shotgunning that card like instantly. There's like no way that you're gonna like let that thing go through, right? So the word thinking immediately raises the attention of the judges around you, just so that, hey, what's he thinking about? And regardless whether you like it or not, if you're stuck under a Fuwalos, you still have to play at a reasonable pace. If you're not, just because you say you're thinking, you're not actually getting extra time. And believe it or not, thinking does take time. It just looks like inaction most of the time, all right? And because of that, you could be receiving a slow play warning. And two of them, most easily upgradable penalty ever. And you don't want to receive it, so what can you do about it? So we can kind of figure that out by identifying what are you actually thinking about. So what are you truly thinking about here? Number one, do I pass turn? And if the answer is yes, that means you looked at your hand, you saw that you have enough hand traps, you can just pass turn without committing any single card to your opponent. Or you're going to pass turn, but you're going to do some stuff before you pass, like set your imperm, set a monster, something just to keep yourself alive so that they don't automatically get a win. Another thing to check for is triple tactics thrust. Set like a D barrier, set like a imperm, maximize your chances of disruption. That's what you're going to have to kind of go into. And a lot of people are choosing to main deck triple tactics thrust, so expect that if you get hit by a Fuwalos, this is one way to actually truly counter it. Another way is play a deck where Fuwalos doesn't even matter because you're playing a deck like Cashier, you're summoning from hand, only Perulia truly hurts you, but since they threw Fuwalos, the incorrect Mulcharmy, and that's the difference between that and Maxi, Maxi's always going to work against you. This is not, and because it's not, you understand that, hey, I can just play right through it. And speaking of playing right through it, if you don't have the cards to just pass turn and survive, then you're going to have to commit into giving your opponent cards. And what are you thinking about then? So, first thing first, think if you can pass or not. If not, then you proceed to part two. Do I have a line in my back pocket that's ready to absorb this situation so I can minimize the amount of cards I give to my opponent and maximize my output? So that's pretty much like, do I have something I can do to not give my opponent a lot of cards and still survive? It's all about survival at this point, because if it's turn one, you can't go for game anyway. You're not playing an FTK, and FTKs are pretty difficult. And I'm not sure if you want to FTK, like say do a gimmick puppet FTK while under a Fuwalos, hoping that maybe you're not going to get some of your burn effects completely negated. It's just a little bit of an unrealistic demand there. But if you're going to be committing into it, what effects are you seeking out? Abyss Dwellers, Floodgates, I guess maybe even Baguska. Things that have game rippling effects on the game state where your opponent actually has to answer it before they get to do anything. That's what you're seeking out. That's why like the D barrier searches are so important if you have the triple tactics thrust. Or you can go for, say, cards that are 2-for-1s, like the just going into an IP, leaving additional monsters, so you have an SP interaction against your opponent, going to Silhouette Rabbit with a back row pop and the additional battle phase protection so that your monsters don't get destroyed. These are options that you have to disrupt your opponent, and they're like gaining pluses. Just as they draw cards, you set up more cards yourself, and that's kind of what you're looking for. These are the plays that you're looking for. And the only way that you're going to understand this is by practicing. You should be practicing these lines as if you are playing under Mulcharmy, so that you don't have to sit there and say the word thinking half the time. Because if you're trying to execute a combo while not understanding your line, you're going to burn time thinking, and you might even draw attention of a judge, and that might actually hand down a slow play warning for you. And at that point, you're going to feel even more pressure because you're thinking on the spot there. So practice at home, understand what your deck can do. And this is why if you're going to be going to a high-level competition, expect to be hit by Fuwalos or any sort of Mulcharmy, be ready for that. And I guess my final tip here is practice, and if you're going to go in, commit to it. Don't half-ass something, because you're already going to be giving them stuff already. And if you stop halfway, by your own choice, you would have given them free cards and you still haven't developed your board enough. And that's all we have. And then once you commit, at least you're not going to slow down and think about it some more. So that's what happens if you get hit by Max C or Mulcharmy. You know, they're all the same. You just have to bite the bullet sometimes. Then we have Dominus Impulse. We didn't forget about that. That card's amazingly powerful, but why we have to talk about the restriction here, which is the wind, the light, the earth, is because the top decks also mix in those attributes. And sometimes they forgot that they activated Impulse from hand, which restricts them from activating those particular cards for the rest of the duel. This is a blanketing restriction for the entire duel. People sometimes forget about it. They activated so early on, and they were in a desperate state. They're hand trapping their opponents back and forth, and they drew into like a hand trap with that attribute, and they forgot like, oh, I can't activate this. It's just something that you have to keep in mind. Looking at the meta decks we have White Forest, we have Azamina, Snake Eye, there's of course Tenpai, there's even Yubel. So just within those 4 decks, obviously the one deck that's not going to play is going to be White Forest, because they're light base. They're not going to touch it. That kills their entire deck. There's no reason whatsoever. Even the Runic package gets ruined by that. So looking at the other 3, let's look at Tenpai first. Tenpai, they play a ton of hand traps. They play everything. Essentially, they have the Veilers, they have the Ogres, they have a couple of Nibs. They are playing a hand trap based package because Fuwalos and Perulia can generate that many cards for them. So Fuwalos, automatically a win monster. Is that going to be an issue? No, because in turn 1, you could just drop that card as one of the earliest drops, and it's not going to conflict. You already done it, and every subsequent Fuwalos drop anyway is less likely going to be able to activate because you're going to be able to control cards. That's not going to allow you to activate. Perulia, still okay, but when it comes to like some stuff in the extra deck, the Hermetic Seals of Heavenly Spheres, I still see people making into that monster after they get hand trap disrupted to the point that they can't continue. They make that, and I'm like, wow, that is such a waste, because it can't trigger. It can't activate the quick effect. It won't trigger in the graveyard. It's a bad monster now because it's literally just a 0 attack funnel directly to your life points. It's not very good, but people forget because they activated the Impulse from hand. And another deck that can't really use it, that I see a misplay that go in, is that people go into their Moon of the Closed Heaven, and then they go into Requiem, and they try to summon out the Fiendsmith Engraver, or try to summon out Lacrima of the Scarlet Tears. They can't activate the Requiem, and they realize that they botched out 2 of their monsters for like a hard 0, essentially. It just is terrible because people kind of forget that, hey, the Fiendsmith package, it's light. Likely why Yubel is very unlikely to play it, because the Fiendsmith package gives them access to making the sequence into making the Aerial Eater. And Aerial Eater, guess what? That's also a wind monster, so you're not likely to see this in Yubel. I mean, they can try, but it's not likely. But Azamina, that goes into Snake Eye, or the Tenpai that plays into the hand traps. But here's an interesting note. Samurai Destroyer. Remember, it's only cards that activate that can't be used in terms of their effects. But Samurai Destroyer's effect isn't one that activates. It just has to declare the attack, and a lot of the continuous effects of Samurai Destroyer will still go through, and that's one thing. You know, they can't use seals, but Destroyer is still kind of okay. It just won't summon itself back if it's kind of removed off of the board incorrectly. So these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind also for like continuous effects. And why I mentioned that is because you can also activate like Impulse from your hand, and then you can summon a Mono Iwado, and that Mono Iwado will never bounce back to your hand because it can't activate as an Earth monster, so no one's playing with any more effects. Yes, it's a very disgusting play, and I can't believe I mentioned it in this video, but it is something that stun players are probably going to look forward to in terms of shutting down all your effects, because it's worse than Skill Drain, 100%. So to kind of sum it up, what are some of the hand traps your opponent cannot use after they use Dominus Impulse? Number one, Psyframe, Gear, Gamma, or Delta. Those two get completely shut out because you're trying to use its effect to summon and negate. That's not going to work. Two is going to be Nibiru. If they are under Fuwalos, they drew into Impulse, and then you hit them, they continue to summon, you draw into a Nibiru, that Nibiru cannot be activated. Some people get overly eager, like, oh, he summoned over 5 times, kind of forgot their own restriction. They could create some irreparable game state or some bad accepted game state, and it's up to both players to maintain the game state when it comes to this. Like, oh yeah, he's under a permanent lock of light, wind, and earth. Additional monsters they can't use. Droll and Lockbird. I've seen people like, oh, drew into a Droll and Lockbird, they droll their opponent. You just impulse the guy. You can't use Droll anymore. That card's out of the question. No Veiler, no Ghost Ogre. So in terms of people that play Dominus Impulse, it could also affect how they build their deck in terms of the hand trap lineup they're choosing to play. And that's something that, some people out there can make a spreadsheet for. So there's that. That's all I got for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Keep a lot of this stuff in your head because it's going to matter, and it's going to have to reshape how we think about, the upcoming modern formats of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because if it's going to be part of our game, this is the stuff that's happening, and it's just going to become second nature at some point. But right now, we are at the dawn of playing against a new version of Max C, a new thing that people are going to play that have blanketing restrictions across the board, and it's up to us to really maintain the game state when it comes to this stuff. And I know people want to get, the best out of the decks. They want to min-max all the hand traps they have available, but sometimes as a part of this min-maxing, you're going to have to keep track of even more restrictions and better sequencing just so that everything is proper and legal. That's all I got for this video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, smash that thumbs up button for me. Hit subscribe, ding that notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.